it is finally time. This video is going to be a bit different from my usual style. I haven't done a proper sit-down video in quite a while, but this video has been requested by you guys for months. So today I'll be sharing all the cottagecore books, movies, and TV shows that you can enjoy this spring and summer. But first, I want to say a big thank you to today's sponsor, which is Book of the Month. Book of the Month is an extremely fast-growing and popular online book subscription service for all different kinds of readers, and they really focus on promoting new and emerging authors so that readers can discover new books that they'll love. And their team vets hundreds of books every month so that they can put together a curated selection for you to choose from. And then you can choose 1 or 2 or even 3. And the books are delivered straight to your door. You get to keep them. You don't have to send them back. And it feels like my birthday every month when I receive my books. One of the best parts about Book of the Month is that you can skip any month at any time, no charge to you. So here are the book picks that they have for April. People We Meet on Vacation, which is a romance novel for fans of When Harry Met Sally. It's a story about 2 people in love who might be the only ones that don't know it yet. Arsenic and Adobo. This is a mystery novel about that awkward moment when your ex-boyfriend gets poisoned in your restaurant and everyone thinks you did it. Liberty. This is a historical fiction novel about a girl who has to fight to shape her future in 1800s New York City. The Hunting Wives is a thriller about a group of Southern women who are on the hunt in more ways than one. And What Comes After is a contemporary fiction novel about a town struggling after the death of 2 boys. It's a moving novel that offers hope and wisdom. This month, if you use the code SPRINGFUN, you can get your first book for only $9.99, and I'll have the link and code down in the description box if you want to go check out Book of the Month for yourself. But now let's continue on to the rest of the video. So, for those of you who don't really know what cottagecore is, because it is a more recent trend and aesthetic, as a concept, it focuses on embracing a simpler way of living, a simpler way of life, and an existence that is more harmonious with nature. It places high value on tranquility and wholesome activities. The New York Times described it as a reaction to hustle culture, and I used to be all about hustle culture, but no, not anymore. And then in 2020, after the pandemic, they named it the aesthetic where quarantine is romantic instead of terrifying, which, I mean, it really did help me through quarantine. Cottagecore has saved me in so many ways. To a lot of people, it's also an escape from many forms of stress and trauma. But there's not just one definition to define what cottagecore is. So today I'm just going to share my personal perspective and the criteria that I use to determine whether something is cottagecore or not. And just like my Dark Academia video, I just have 2 criteria for cottagecore. 1 being that it involves the desire to live a more simpler life and enjoy the little things, specifically the little joys that we get from nature. So for example, I would say Anne of Green Gables can be classified as cottagecore. Anne is like the poster child for romanticizing things and enjoying the small things, especially the things that she discovers in nature. And then my second criteria would be the way that it looks or makes me feel, meaning the aesthetic. Think pastel colors with whites, browns, greens, a sort of Anne of Green Gables farmhouse style interior, lots of flowers, frames, kind of the opposite of minimalistic style, pinafores, gingham, flowy skirts and dresses, lots of rural and beautiful country life settings like the English countryside, cottages, meadows, gardens, cute lacy socks and hair bows, baking bread, drinking tea, reading, pressing flowers, frolicking, clothes hanging on the line, flower crowns, candles, and pretty much anything handmade or embroidered. And then there's also fairycore and light academia, which I think are very similar to cottagecore. Fairycore is a bit more ethereal and light academia is a bit more academic. I would say Pride and Prejudice is the perfect mix between cottagecore and light academia. People will probably disagree with me on some things, but this is just how I see it. So first up, I'm going to go through some of the books that give me all of the cottagecore vibes. can't start this off without mentioning the queen, in my opinion, of cottagecore, and that would be Ella Montgomery, the author of the Anne of Green Gables series and so many other amazing standalone books and series as well. If you're wanting to get into cottagecore books, look no further than Anne of Green Gables. This has got it all when it comes to cottagecore. I'm not going to tell you what it's about because you probably already know. Even just these covers are so cottagecore-y just in and of themselves. Also, a new favorite that I have by Ella Montgomery is called Jane of Lantern Hill. It has the most beautiful writing about Prince Edward Island. If you like nature writing, like descriptions of nature, the seaside and the way the moon and the stars look at night and the way the rolling hills look when the sun hits them, this book is so descriptive. It's about a girl who goes to live with her father because her parents are separated. He lives on Prince Edward Island, and just how she falls in love with life there. It's so, so beautiful. I highly recommend it. And then next I've got this one, and it is called The Unicorn Handbook, a spellbinding collection of literature, lore, art, recipes, and projects. The reason that I think this one is very cottagecore is because there are chapters about forest bathing and the idea of going out in the forest not to exercise, not to go on a long hike, but to take in your surroundings. Japanese researchers conducted a study of people who spent more time out in the forest every day and how their stress hormones were lowered. It's full of so much history, beautiful artwork, and I love the projects. There's one about how to make a lavender wand. So I think this one is an absolutely perfect cottagecore book. And then I've got the complete collection of the Bramley Hedge books. Okay, I know I said this about Anne of Green Gables, but books don't get closer to being cottagecore than this book does. Not only are the illustrations so extremely beautiful, full of nature, the countryside, lakes, trees, flowers, gardens, but the activities are also the wholesome cottagecore activities: baking bread, going on picnics, sewing, embroidery, cooking, and enjoying all of life's little pleasures. It's so good. And next up, I've got The Diary of an Edwardian Lady by Edith Holden. This is a reproduction of Edith Holden's diary from 1906, and she chronicled a year in her beloved English countryside. Every month she has different quotes, there's poetry, and then she writes little notes for what she experiences that day, whether it be a new bird in the tree next to her window or some frogs that came out during a rainstorm, the way the clouds look in the morning, and the writing is just absolutely stunning. Then I've got The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. If you like Jane Austen and you're interested in cottagecore, I would definitely recommend this one. It's about a group of people that come together to save Jane Austen's beloved cottage, and I believe it takes place just after World War II. So it's set in the English countryside. There's a lot of talk about Jane Austen and her novels, and of course an entire village that wants to save her home and her legacy. Up next, I have Spindle's End by Robin McKinley. This one is so good. It is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. It's full of talking to animals, well, more like communicating with them through her mind. Fairies. She lives in the cutest little village, and she really does enjoy her small time life, and she doesn't necessarily want to go back and be the princess of her kingdom. Very, very cottagecore. Oh, okay, I love this one so much. This is The Two Princesses of Bamar by Gail Carson Levine. This is by the same author as Ella Enchanted. So this is a mix of medieval vibes and cottagecore because it's set back in the same time period as Ella Enchanted. There are castles and kingdoms, and in this book there are two sisters, and there's this gray death that is going around the kingdom, and you can't avoid it. If you get it, there's a time period, you're gonna get certain symptoms and then die. One of the sisters gets the illness, and the other sister, who's a bit more shy and timid, has to go out and find the cure so that she can save her sister. This one made me think of cottagecore because a lot of it is spent out in nature as she's on this adventure to find a cure. She comes in contact with ogres and dragons, lots of different plants. There's just something about this one, the way it made me feel, that gave me all the cottagecore vibes. And then I have How to Be a Wildflower, a Field Guide by Katie Desi? Is that Daisy? That is such a cute last name. On the back it says, "Do you remember how easily you perceived the magic of the natural world when you were a child?" So this one is going to give you all of those feelings of nostalgia. It rekindles that magic that every child has. I've been using this one to press some of my flowers. This is a book that will show you how to make a flower crown. It has so many beautiful quotes about nature and flowers. It has maps and so many tips and ideas, inspiration. For example, this page says, different hot springs that you can go visit in the US. How to purify water. There's even a camping checklist. I love it. It is just so full of treasures, and obviously it's kind of self-explanatory why this book perfectly fits the cottagecore aesthetic. Next, I have one that I haven't actually read yet, but I found it when I was doing research for this topic, and I can't believe I didn't know about it before, and it is Mandy by Julie Andrews Edwards. Yes, that is the Julie Andrews, the Queen of Genovia, Fräulein Maria, my absolute favorite actress of all time. It's about a girl who is orphaned, and she dreams of a place to call her own. So one day she climbs over this wall, escapes the orphanage, and as she's exploring the outside world, she discovers this tiny deserted cottage. And then all throughout spring, summer, and fall, she transforms it into a place that she can call home. Even just the cover, so cottagecore. She's laying out on the grass, barefoot, there's a hedgehog, butterflies, flowers, a watering can, this cottage that is covered in flowers. And then I have Snow and a Rose by Emily Winfield Martin. This one is cottagecore mixed with fairy tales. On the back it says, Snow and Rose didn't know they were living in a fairy tale. People never do. These two sisters live in these magical enchanted woods, and it's the story of these enchanted woods that have been waiting for these two sisters to break a terrible curse. It also has the prettiest illustrations, eating lots of homemade foods and not flowers, but I meant like there are illustrations of flowers, not eating the flowers, although I'm sure they probably did eat flowers, the edible kind, you know, not the poisonous ones. I am obsessed with these illustrations. There's, you know, like, look at the little mushrooms. This illustration, you can see they are wearing flower crowns. So if you're looking for a cottagecore middle grade, this would be a great one to go with. And then before we move on to movies, I have to recommend some classics. We'll go through these quickly because you probably know what they're all about. So first, I have The Wind in the Willows. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats. There's also a movie for this one that is absolutely phenomenal.
You believe me, my young friend, there is nothing, oh, absolutely nothing, half so worth doing as simply messing around in boats.
And then I have Heidi. Oh, I love this one so much. Far from the Madding Crowd. If you want an epic love story, love triangle set in the English countryside about a woman who inherits this farm and is dealing with all of these men vying for her, but is like, oh, so beautiful, and the writing is just top tier, choose this one. Ooh, I captured the castle, a girl living in a kind of crumbling castle with her family, and this is her, essentially like her diary of her daily goings on with her family. It's so good. Oh, and then of course, The Secret Garden. Cannot have a cottagecore list of books without The Secret Garden. And finally, probably my favorite book in the classics category, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Bilbo Baggins is the ultimate like cottagecore being. Like, he loves being at home, he loves gardening, planting flowers, cooking, enjoying his meals, savoring that last bite of food, and living a simplistic lifestyle. So that's it for all of the books. Let's move on to movies. I want to start off with not just a movie, but a director and a bunch of his movies. So we're talking about Miyazaki and basically all of the Studio Ghibli films. But more specifically, When Marnie Was There, Totoro, Howl's Moving Castle, and The Secret Life of Arrietty. All of these movies spend a lot of time in the countryside and then a lot of cottagecore-like activities. For example, in When Marnie Was There, our main character loves to sketch and to draw. And then the scenery in Howl's Moving Castle, all of the beautiful flowers and the lakes. There's just something about the Studio Ghibli films that brings back that sense of childhood wonder. And then for the cottagecore aesthetic, we've got a lot of the Japanese countryside. For example, in When Marnie Was There, our main character gets sent to the countryside because she has asthma, and the doctors think that being out in fresh air will be better for her. She loves sketching, which falls under the category of wholesome activities. Totoro is also set in the beautiful countryside. It romanticizes a lot of little joys in life. And then a lot of the fashion and clothing in Ghibli films is very much cottagecore. Lots of flowy dresses. The Secret World of Arrietty is about these small little people, and the scenery. Everything about, like, every scene in that film is so stunning. Even the inside of the house where they live, it is just so cozy and gives me all of the cottagecore vibes. And then I would even say Kiki's delivery service too, I forgot that one. Again, the way that it looks and feels with all the flowers and the cottage that her parents live in, even the city that she ends up going to. She ends up working in a bakery. Overall, Studio Ghibli just is very focused on that childhood sense of wonder and appreciating all of the little things that make life beautiful, which is very much in line with the aesthetic of cottagecore. Next is Miss Potter. This one stars Renee Zellweger and Ewan McGregor, and it's a biographical film based on Beatrix Potter's life. She is the author and illustrator behind the Peter Rabbit books. In the film, we see her struggle to become an author. Her parents don't think that it is right for her to be doing. She needs to be focusing on getting married, but she has no interest in getting married. And it's set in Victorian England. We see her as a child and how she grows up. We also see these illustrations, these little animated illustrations throughout the film that I think are really, really cute and quaint. Ultimately, it's the story of how she became a published author and illustrator and how she found love in Ewan McGregor's character. It's so cute and lovely. In terms of the aesthetic and cottagecore vibes, we do see a lot of scenes that are set in the countryside, and as she pursues her love of illustrating, Peter Rabbit is very much a cottagecore book. It is set in a garden, so it's definitely a great film to give you all of those cottagecore vibes. And then next is Maleficent and Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. I think the second one is a bit more cottagecore than the first one. Story of a beautiful young woman of pure heart played by Angelina Jolie, and then these threats come in and she rises up to be a protector, but then a terrible betrayal hardens her heart, which kind of makes her become a bit more evil. There's this epic battle, and then she curses the king's newborn daughter, Aurora, realizing later that Aurora holds the key to peace between the kingdoms. But what makes the film fit the cottagecore aesthetic, for me anyway, is the way that Aurora views life. Aurora is not scared to fight for what she believes, to protect the fairies and all of the creatures of her land. Also, the way that she dresses, her hair, literally that whole aesthetic going on is so cottagecore. She also has that childlike sense of wonder and appreciation for all of the small things. And she doesn't mind living out in the woods, in the forest, and spending her time with butterflies and animals rather than the people in the kingdom. It's not like the best movie, but I really do enjoy the aesthetic, especially when they're in the forest kingdom. Another cottagecore based film would be Tuck Everlasting. It's about our main character named Winnie Foster, who dreams of a life outside of the control of her domineering mother. So one day when Winnie is kind of feeling fed up with her controlled life, she escapes and she's running through the woods, and she comes to meet Jesse Tuck. He kind of takes her back to meet his family, and they take her in as one of their own. The cottagecore aesthetic is very much there with the theme of living life slowly. And one of the central themes is not wishing that you could live forever, but being afraid of the unlived life. How are you going to live your life every day to make it a life worth living? The 1880s fashion is absolutely beautiful, with Winnie's dresses that she wears towards the beginning, and then the simple clothing of the Tucks, very much in the realm of cottagecore. The atmosphere of the film is just very charming, and where the Tucks live is absolutely beautiful. There are a lot of scenes of running through meadows. There's a scene where they're petting this little baby deer, jumping off of waterfalls, and just very much living a very simple life. Next is This Beautiful Fantastic. This one is about a young woman named Bella Brown, and more than anything, she wants to become a writer. So while she spends her days working in a public library, she spends her evenings and mornings working on writing a children's book. She has this fear of plants that has caused her to neglect the garden behind her rented house. Her landlord ends up giving her 1 month to fix up this neglected garden or face eviction. She doesn't want to leave, so obviously she decides to start fixing it up with the help of her grumpy next door neighbor. He lends her a book that she ends up reading cover to cover, and she really dives into this challenge of transforming her garden. So the way that this one relates to cottagecore, of course, is the whole gardening aspect. And the way that she actually starts to change as she develops this relationship with her neighbor, who helps her to see gardening as not just this task, but as something that actually changes you and becomes a passion. It's set in England, it's very quaint, and it's very much just a feel-good film. And then next is The Sound of Music, one of my favorite movies of all time. This is the story of the real-life Von Trapp family singers, and the story takes place just before World War II. It stars my queen, Julie Andrews, and her character Maria ends up leaving this abbey in Austria to become a governess in the home of a widowed naval captain. He has 7 children, and Maria, played by Julie Andrews, ends up bringing a new love for life and music into this home that was lacking a lot of life ever since his wife died. I say this one as being a cottagecore film because there are a lot of elements. She makes them clothes out of old curtains and drapes. There are scenes when they're on this boat in the river and they fall out and they're swimming, and also it's full of music and songs. I mean, the opening song literally says, "The hills are alive with the sound of music." It doesn't get more cottagecore than frolicking through hills as you sing songs and running through the city in your homemade clothes. And then Pride and Prejudice, or pretty much any Jane Austen film, specifically Emma, the 2020 adaptation, and Sense and Sensibility. And I know there's this debate amongst Pride and Prejudice fans. I adore the 2005 adaptation, so that's what I'm going to be talking about, but the BBC is more accurate to the book. I just love the aesthetic of the 2005 version. We follow our heroine Elizabeth Bennet as she lives with her mother, father, and sisters in the English countryside in a house that is quite chaotic sometimes. Lizzie, being the eldest, she faces this pressure that she needs to marry and marry well. She is very opinionated and outspoken, and she ends up getting introduced to the handsome and very well-off Mr. Darcy. And there's this chemistry there, even though they both do not like each other in the beginning. And the movie progresses as we see their relationship grow, and as it is threatened by certain things such as Pride and Prejudice. But throughout that, we also get these scenes that are perfectly cottagecore. There's the scene of Lizzie on these cliffs, and then you just got the beauty of the Regency era costumes, cinematography, the sprawling landscapes, and her walking through these fields and the flowers, and her talking with her dad out by this lake and these trees, and the sun is setting. And then the scene of Darcy walking through the fog and the grass, and oh my gosh, I could go on and on about this one. Whether you like Jane Austen or whether you prefer the 2005 adaptation, watch this film just purely for the aesthetic. It is a feast for the eyes. And then we've got another movie based on a novel, and that is I Captured the Castle. I know I already talked about the book, but the movie is absolutely stunning. I had to include it. And I think the intrigue for this one is really owed to the setting of the castle. This one has so much cottagecore charm. The story is told from the perspective of 17-year-old Cassandra, who lives in this castle with her family. The story follows the family's attempt to orchestrate a marriage between Rose, which is Cassandra's older sister, and a wealthy family that has moved in nearby. But what I love so much about it is all of the small little details. In terms of aesthetic, it's set in the English countryside yet again. It's set in the 1930s, and it has this very vintagey cottagecore allure that I think is just, it makes watching the film so enjoyable just to look at it. And I think the story really has something for everyone. It has romance, comedy, and definitely some twists and turns. There are some sad moments, but there are also really, really happy ones and really funny ones. And I will leave the information on where to watch all of these films down in the description box, just so that you know where you can go watch them or if they're available to you. So now let's move on to TV shows. First up, we've got Anne with an E. This one is a Netflix TV show adaptation of the book Anne of Green Gables. Everything in this show, down to the smallest detail, is perfect for cottagecore fans. The house, the farm setting. Anne absolutely loves nature, riding horses, admiring the little details of a flower or an animal. She's always going on walks with her friends, and there are so many scenes of her and Diana out in the woods. And she's the one fictional character that I think of when I think of Cottagecore. And everything about it just makes me feel like I'm living in a little cottage on Prince Edward Island and that I'm like best friends with Anne, living my best life. There are some heavier themes, especially in the first few episodes, but once you get past that, it's not as heavy throughout the rest of the series. It is a must if you are into Cottagecore. And then I have some anime shows. So the first one is Laid Back Camp, otherwise known as Yuru Camp. This one is about a girl who enjoys camping and she prefers to go by herself because she finds that she is able to enjoy it more with less people around. But then throughout the series, she is joined by some friends who have also discovered their recent love for camping, and they go to different campsites throughout Japan, the countryside. It's all about taking time in nature to enjoy beautiful scenery, cooking, and the company of good friends. The mood in the show is very lighthearted. It makes you feel so much serotonin just watching it because of how they appreciate the way that the clouds part from Mount Fuji and they can see the light from the moon shining down on the lake, or the way that gooey marshmallows taste in your mouth when they are done to perfection over the fire. It makes me want to go spend a night in the woods, and that's coming from someone who doesn't even enjoy camping at all. It's just everything you could want if you just want a show to give you serotonin and make you feel happy. To me, it feels very cottagecore because they leave the city and they go to spend time in nature, and they love the way that it makes them feel. So I really, really highly recommend this one. And then next is Snow White with the Red Hair. This is such a cute and sweet show. It's about a cheerful red-haired girl who is living in this kingdom, and she works as an apothecary at this herb shop. Her life changes drastically when the prince of this kingdom decides that he wants to take her as his concubine, and she is not having that, so she runs and escapes into the woods, where she is then rescued by a prince from a neighboring kingdom. And then, hoping to repay her debt to this prince, she pursues a career as the court herbalist in his kingdom. This is more on the side of that kind of like medieval fairy tale cottagecore. We've got the kingdoms and the castles, but also the woods, and as an herbalist, she does have a close relationship to plants and flowers. Also, her clothes, I think she has some pinafores and really flowy dresses. It's a really, really sweet story, and the cottagecore aesthetic is very much there. And then next, we've got Lark Rise to Candleford. This is one I just recently started. It's a BBC adaptation of this woman, I think her name is Flora Thompson, and she wrote these autobiographical novels about her life living in the English countryside between the years 1939 and 1943. It's set in this quaint little village of Lark Rise, and we follow this young girl named Laura Timmins as she leaves her home in Lark Rise and travels to Candleford to kind of start a new life with her mother's cousin. And then we just get to see her daily life, settling into a new town and the friendships that she starts to make. It ticks a lot of the boxes for cottagecore: the clothing, the dresses, the aprons. I only just started watching this one, so I can't say too much about it, but I'm really enjoying it, and it's the perfect, like, I'm gonna have a chill evening and watch some of this show. It makes me feel, again, so happy and just so good. I highly recommend it, even though I haven't seen a ton of it yet. I do have an entire list of cottagecore movies, books, and TV shows that I haven't even mentioned. I am going to leave it in the description box, so if you want more recommendations, definitely go check it out. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear what your favorite cottagecore movie, book, or TV show is, so definitely leave a comment and let me know so that I can go check it out. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, friends!